What is servanthood leadership? How do leaders integrate their spiritual beliefs into their management styles? And what have been the experiences of managers with following this process? Welcome to the Graziadio Business Review. This is June 23rd, 2010. I am Dr. Charles Morrissey, Associate Professor of Strategy at the Graziadio School of Business and Management at Pepperdine University. Today I'm pleased to welcome David Bowman. David recently received our Distinguished Alumni Award at our graduation in April. David graduated from our Executive MSTM program in 1998. Dave Bowman is an experienced corporate development executive, having spent over 30 years in the aerospace and defense industry. He recently was Vice President and General Manager for Boeing's Global Mobility Systems Division, leading all mobility business activities. Previous to that assignment, he was Vice President and C-17 Program Manager, responsible for business, technical, production, and support operations for the Boeing C-17 Globemaster III program. Prior to that, he was General Manager for the AV-8B Harrier program in St. Louis, Missouri. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Dr. Morrissey. It's a pleasure to be here.
The acceptance speech at our recent GSBM graduation presented an insightful look at your perception of leadership developed over your many years in management at Boeing. Coincidentally, there's been a resurgence in the field of leadership research. A recent conference in this field summarized it as based on very complex phenomena. As you know, as faculty, we are faced with translating these studies into how they inform the realities of the management job. For example, you use the term servanthood leadership to capture your thoughts on this experience. What is servanthood leadership? Well,
first, in my view, one has to look at who are leaders? Who are we talking about? To be a person in an organization chart can be a manager, but I would expect them, especially if I work for them, to be a leader. But leaders are also we're all called to be leaders. They're leaders in your family, for your children, leaders in the community, leaders when you're leading versus following when you're part of a team or you're in a community. So I consider all of this leaders. So we all actually are leaders at some point in our lives or often in our lives. When I look at leaders in that manner, whether it's in a business environment or other, I look at, okay, what template am I supposed to follow? What is leadership? There's so many books on it. We teach it certainly here at Pepperdine and teach it in universities and on the job, how to manage and all the tools you need in the toolbox. But I'm a simple guy, and I need something very simple to be my compass, to lead me. So I years ago sought for some definition where I can set the books aside for a moment, have my toolbox, set the books aside, and say, what is leadership for me? And a DNA, if you will. And what I came up with after lots of thought and looking at lots of definitions was a very, very simple equation that I remember always, and I always go back to it when the need arises, which is often. And that is that leadership, it's 5 words. Leadership is connecting people to their future. Sounds like motherhood, sounds basic, and we could be done with this discussion, but there's actually a lot to it. And again, this is leading in any environment. Connecting, the first word. Connecting it's an action, right? Being a manager on an org chart or being a leader, an executive on an org chart is not enough. Sitting in your office watching the world go by doesn't do it. We are active, we need to be active bridge builders, connecting things. And what are we connecting? We're connecting people. And that's very important. It's just the word people. It's not people, it's a diversity equation. It's not people like me that think like me, look like me, have the same experience as me. It's everybody. And in turn, everybody makes a difference together. So connecting people to what? And this is the servanthood part you were asking about. To what? It's to their future. If a manager or prescribed leader is only in the job they're in, or if their continuous passion is to achieve the next level, if their continuous passion is about their future, in my view, they're not good leaders. They may be successful at some particular job or project, but they're not good leaders. Leadership is, to me, all about and only about connecting people to their future.
Most managers are hungry for a recipe on how to become this effective leader. How does one go about exercising your definition of servanthood to attain this perception of your leadership concept?
And that's a real tough one, and I certainly am always looking for that same recipe, that same sort of go-to, how-to, step by step. And technically, I don't think it exists. I do believe that it's inside of each of us to perform, to connect people to their future. But I believe that when we don't find it, or if we don't find it, or if we aren't exercising it, it's because of a balance situation inside of us. Some people call it work-life balance. So I've taught at several classes at our Boeing Leadership Center in Missouri, mostly around inspiring performance kinds of topics. And I always ask the class, you know, do you have balance? Do you believe in balance? Everybody raise their hand. Do you have balance? Many people raise their hand, and I do this on purpose. It's not necessarily getting people's faces, but I tell them I disagree with them, that they don't have balance, that it's nebulous. You cannot have balance. What you can have, in my view, what you can have is again, a compass, something that drives you towards balance. Life is dynamic, it's not static. I don't think there's, you know, there might be a point in the day or a point in a week that you have this balance. But how do you get this balance, or how do you have this compass? And again, I'm a simple guy. I look for DNA, metaphors, those kinds of things that I can remember and call upon as needed. For balance, I had the opportunity to go to the Center for Creative Leadership in Colorado Springs, a course called Leadership at the Peak. And I want to give them credit for this because I didn't invent this, but I use it today, and this was 2 decades ago. And it's a button. Simple button, 4 holes around a circle. What's a button do, right? It threads through all these holes and it holds things together. That's in itself a good metaphor in my view. But if you represent those 4 holes, I mean, we're all trying to balance something. And if we're really trying to balance the complete us, then it's family, it's career, it's our job, it's the community, and a lot of folks forget that piece, giving back. And it's ourself, and a lot of folks forget that one as well. You know, the family, I think, is self-explanatory. The career, certainly self-explanatory. The community, there's a lot of folks that don't get involved in the community, and I don't understand that in terms of being a good leader anyway. Again, you can manage, but you may not be a good leader. And self, so many people miss that. This is about, not about, you know, self-worth or self, you know, internalizing self. This is about health. This is about exercise. And this is about taking time to decompress from the stresses of whatever you're undertaking. And it's all surrounded, the circumference of this is spirituality. And that's whatever your belief system is. It doesn't matter what it is. This isn't preaching. But it's spirituality, and that's you. That's what you believe in. And if any of these inner circles get too big or too small, what's the effect of the button? So I look at it, I actually visualize it in myself. I'm getting, you know, I'm on boards and so forth in the community, and maybe this week or this month I'm spending way more time there than I am maybe somewhere else. Or I haven't been taking care of my health as I should, or my family's been dismissed because I'm traveling for career, for work. It makes it really easy to bring it back. And I think when you have that balance, then you can see this servanthood leadership definition, connecting people to their future, such that you can actually go and affect change.
That's an interesting perception, David. You also use with the graduates this phrase, a biblical reference, as wise as serpents, and as harmless as doves. And how did the spiritual beliefs in these readings also influence your view of leadership?
Well, let me start by contextualizing what I was doing at the commencement. Very short comments I was making. I had defined or was defining this definition of leadership that we've been talking about today. But I went to the best pinnacle of leadership in the history of mankind, Jesus. And in fact, when Jesus was, this is after he'd picked his leadership team, and you know, Lord knows why he picked the people he picked. They're not people you or I probably would pick. And taught them. He was sending them out to lead. And in Matthew chapter 10, verse 8, he talks about freely ye receive, freely give. Now, certainly that's well known at Pepperdine,
yes.
And I wanted to use that because I thought it was appropriate. These graduates were going out from what they had received from Pepperdine as leaders. Well, Jesus goes on in that same area in chapter 10, verse 16, and says, "So be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves." Well, then you go back and you look at Jesus' life as a leader. Now we're just making that connection. As a leader, you can go through all the examples of everything we're talking about servanthood leadership, but all the examples of leadership in general. A vision, a mission, creating a leadership team, staying focused on the mission and going through much sacrifice to get to the end state, the vision that he was after. Strong. Right? Wise as serpents, and yet probably the most humble, meek leader that we could ever look to subscribe to was in fact Jesus. There is a book I brought with me, and I wanted to just bring it up because I want to reference something in it, called Jesus CEO. It's a very easy read, simple read. Lori Beth Jones wrote this book. I want to make sure she has the credit. It goes through very, very short, brief examples all the way through the outline of a leader, in this case a CEO, and the correlations of, I mean, everything. But ends with, and this at least makes me think quite a bit, ends with, you know, when Jesus dies, does his letter to the chairman of the board read something like, I've completed my task here by doing the following, you know, raising the dead, you know, little girl and Lazarus, turning water into wine, multiplying loaves and fishes on numerous occasions, reducing the number of those on sick leave throughout my territory. You know, it didn't say, I've left construction of the temple in capable hands, or and it'll be finished in May, or I've doubled the number of your recruits here, etc. No, his final words were, and if you put dear chairman of the board in the front of this, you know, as proof of my good work here, I present to you Peter, James, John, Mary Magdalene, and Martha, completed in love. His greatest feat at the end of the day was people, was the people that he brought forward. That, to me, is the leadership connecting people to the future. But the question you're asking, which is wise as serpents and harmless as doves, his whole life was exactly that.
David, that's a wonderful segue into my next question. That is, when was your leadership philosophy tested, and when might you have modified it, or did it verify the fact that your perception was effective?
It's a good question. I don't know that there's one single example, one single dilemma, let's say, that occurred, but several examples that occurred in my history or my life that reaffirmed, for sure. Now, first, before I came to this conclusion of what leadership is, back in 1989, I was working for Douglas Aircraft. I was a senior manager at Douglas Aircraft Company, and we had a situation like many companies at the time that were going through an evolution, a change towards a focus on total quality management, TQM Deming. Great principles, great philosophy, great way, you know, great thing to go strive to do. The way that we did it at Douglas Aircraft was interesting and a lesson, a big takeaway for me. All managers, first line manager all the way up to the most senior executive, were called in to a large paint hangar. All the chairs were set up. We're going to have this big meeting. And we all sat down in this paint hangar, and it was a bit of a rally kind of atmosphere, and didn't know what was going to go on here. And a couple of our leaders stand up on a stage and inform us that we're all out of work, that our jobs are gone. When we walk out of the paint hangar, we are no longer in the position we were in. And for the next 3 months, we'd be going through a series of tests, learnings, and so forth, and then we'd have to bid on the 3 jobs we would want. If we didn't get them, we're out. Needless to say, that wasn't the most inspiring method for TQM evolution. A lot of folks had a lot of problem with it, and as did I. As I strove to say, you know, gee, how could we have done that better? And, you know, everyone knows, I think today cultures don't change that quickly. So to force fit a cultural change just doesn't work. It's 5 years minimum. Most people would argue more. And if it was inspiring, if what we were being led through was something I trusted the leader was looking out for me and connecting me to my future. So that would be an example. 2 quick examples, 2 sides of the spectrum in my history where I've applied it, and it worked in both cases. And you know, so I'm very passionate about it now. You know, one is where I went to lead a team in a whole nother state, in a whole nother culture, and I didn't know the leadership team and they didn't know me. And there was a performance problem going on, and I was to go in there and fix it, right? I certainly remembered 1989. I wasn't going to go in and bring them all in a room and do anything crazy like that. But I was anxious. This was an anxiety issue for me, and my wife, who is my mentor and my leader, she connects me to my future, reminded me that, you know, you've got tools in your toolbox. You can always learn more. But remember your compass. Remember what got you here. You know, remember what you're about and use that. And I did. I went in and worked at understanding, gaining trust, building all the things we were taught, right? Building the team to where the team takes control and team takes ownership, and using employee involvement, employee engagement principles to do that. And it worked. Well, no sooner, I mean, that was a few years down the road, I get another job, just the opposite. A very large organization, a very high-performing, award-winning organization, and what can I do coming in as a leader now? As a manager, I'm in a box. I could go sit in the office and watch the world go by, and we've seen history has shown what happens to companies when you do that. You know, if you don't go through changes, if you're not continuously innovating, if you're not incorporating technology changes as you go along. But how do you do that? And so I was very worried. You know, what's harder, taking an organization at 50% and moving them up, or taking an organization at 99% and moving them up? You know, which is harder? And again, my wife, you know, reminded me, you know, remember what got you here. Remember what got you here. So that was all about the same exact thing: going out and caring and taking care of, and looking at and understanding the people, the leadership team, and the people that are working in that organization, and bring them into the solution and let them be the drivers of their destiny and connect them to their futures.
David, as you know, certainly the management field's been under incredible attack. A lot of it justified over the past 10 or 15 years, and a lot of it is attributed to the management education process itself. MBA schools have been the root of this evil. Was there anything in your management education experience, both here and within the programs at Boeing, that you think could have been strengthened by overlaying your philosophy and delivering a little differently than perhaps the simplicity we've used, do everything right, don't do anything wrong, and that's the end of the lecture?
Well, I do. It goes without saying, I think it goes without saying that whether you're, you know, programs like Pepperdine or other universities or at work and you have educational programs there, you need those. And the toolbox has to get filled. There's no excuse for not, you know, you can try to connect people to the future. If you don't have the tools for marketing, for leadership, for finance, for, you know, et cetera, strategy, vision, you know, the how part becomes very difficult. So you need them. I would always subscribe that if every course, no matter what the topic, had an emphasis on, you know, both leadership, people-focused leadership, an emphasis on change, agent for change. I know Pepperdine does a very good job of this, or at least as I went through the program, the technology management program, that was true. Change, and I would say things, and you don't have to use the button, but I would say things like balance, where they're interwoven into each of the programs, so that there's an integration, if you will, between classes like marketing and finance and so forth. Because at the end of the day, you know, a graduate, and that's what I was trying to get across at the commencement, a graduate walks back out into the job they had, or walks out into a new job, and what are they faced with? They're faced with a whole toolbox of things they can access, but how does it all integrate? How do they become the leaders that they need to be?
I think the response we had from the graduation, and talking with faculty afterwards, who were the toughest people in the world to convince that there's perhaps a new viewpoint, your approaches were very unique. And I want to thank you today for sharing these with us at the Graziadio Business Review, and obviously wish you the best of luck with your future plans.
It's my pleasure, Dr. Morrissey. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is Dr. Chuck Morrissey from the Graziadio Business Report. Find us online at gbr.pepperdine.edu.